times for crossbench is a 5-minute allocation for each crossbench, for 2 crossbench senators. There's a total of 10 minutes, but on the list presented to me, it has 2 segments for crossbenchers. Which, Senator Siewert, do you want a point of clarification?
Yeah, point of clarification. It's up to the rest of the crossbench to decide how they want to spend, how they want to contribute their other 5 minutes. So if the Senators Lyon, and Day want to share that, that's up to them, I would suggest.
Okay. Well, again, I'll seek advice. You're suggesting one of those items should be Greens rather than crossbench. Now, is there any objection to that? And just for further clarification, I will make the first allocation to the Greens party and the second allocation where it says crossbench to crossbench senators, and I assume that we'll have some indication from the crossbenchers during the debate as to who the call would go to. Is everyone comfortable with those arrangements? I'll now call Senator Singh. Senator Singh.
Thank you, Mr President. Well, I speak to this matter of public importance because it is clearly about the Abbott government's confused and chaotic approach to hate speech, but on top of that, the division within the coalition on its approach to hate speech. Now, none of us in this Senate will forget Senator Brandis's now infamous claims that people have a right to be bigots, you know. I'm sure that Senator Brandis's coalition colleagues will never forget this clumsy and offensive remark that he made at that time. Senator Brandis's judgment at that time came under attack from that very moment on as he attempted to implement his foolish commitment to destroy Section 18C of the Racial Discrimination Act. But what we have had since that time on is chaos and confusion on the side of the government. Chaos and confusion. So much so that we had the backflip on Senator Brandis's commitment that he and his colleague Andrew Bolt wanted seeing changed in the Racial Discrimination Act last year. A backflip on that, put in place from pressure from the Prime Minister. And since that time, we've now, it seems, had the government want to go even harder to restrict freedom of speech for certain ethnic groups in our community. Now, on top of that, you've got that going on in one side of the executive of the government. On the other side, you have coalition members, backbenchers, like Senator Smith, for example, and Senator Edwards, as he points to himself, wanting to bring it all back on again. To bring it all back on again, Section 18C of the Racial Discrimination Act. Now, Mr President, we all recall very clearly how categorical the Attorney-General was that a government should never be in the business of penalising people who hold objectionable views in the interests of freedom of speech, absolutely ignoring, in saying so, Section 18D that currently resides in our Racial Discrimination Act. Having said that, now what we have is the government's acceptance of objectionable views that does not extend to objectionable views expressed by certain ethnic groups, notably the Muslim community, for example. To quote Mike Seacombe in the Saturday paper, people have a right to be bigots, I quote, but only, it now appears, if they are government-friendly bigots. If they are government-friendly bigots. When will this government say what it means and do what it says? I mean, we have had backflip after backflip. If we want to talk about the GP tax, if we want to talk about paid parental leave, now Section 18C, which we thought perhaps was dead, buried and cremated, just like we thought work choices was. But then doesn't take long and it starts raising its ugly head again. They are all over the place, Mr Acting Deputy President, on this issue. We know clearly that after coming into government, Senator Brandis published an exposure draft of his Bigots Charter. Media reports followed. soon revealing that he had not originally intended to adopt a consultative approach at all to winding back Section 18C. But rather, Senator Brandis's preference was to ram legislation through the parliament without even a hint of public consultation. Well, the public consultation that he then put in place was pretty much a joke anyway. But having said that, the broader community took him at his word and participated in that public consultation, and participated in a fairly big way. So much so that the Attorney-General got bombarded with so many submissions that he never released publicly. Some of the submitters themselves did, though, and we know clearly that the overwhelming majority of those submissions were against changes to 18C. It was that pressure by so many ethnic communities, so many people in the broader community, the legal fraternity included, the NGO sector. It is that pressure that led to Prime Minister Tony Abbott intervening on Senator Brandis's grand plan to wind back Section 18C and ditch the whole thing. Well, that's what we've had. We've had a ditching of the whole thing since August, but now we know the rumblings are there. Now we know that it's back on the agenda. Isn't it, Senator Edwards? Isn't it, Senator Smith? And we know that we have the support of the crossbench in doing so. Well, Senator Brandis needs to come into this chamber and make it clear, what is this government's policy on racial discrimination laws in this country? Where are they today? What weather is it today? Is it raining? Is it sunshine? Because it seems to change on a daily basis, just like every other policy issue that this government puts in place. They are not fit to govern, Mr Acting Deputy President. They are not fit to govern because they are a rabble. They don't know what they stand for. They are all over the place, and in the meantime, it is people of various different racial backgrounds that are the victims that fall to this government's delusional approach when it comes to racial discrimination laws. Well, it is our hope, it is Labor's hope, that our current racial discrimination laws, which include sections 18C and 18D, which address freedom of speech, remain as is, as they have continued to work for a number of years now. They do not need to be touched, because we in the Labor Party believe that Australia's political leaders ought to focus their energies on bringing people together, on inclusiveness, on protecting the social cohesion that underpins our proud and successful multicultural country. That's what leaders should be doing, not trying to create division amongst various community groups, not trying to create division amongst the broader community. It is really disappointing to see some voices from within the coalition seem to feel that their energies are better directed at prosecuting an agenda of intolerance, bigotry, fear and hatred than an agenda of inclusiveness, compassion and equality. Section 18C has been used to combat the vilest forms of hate speech, and those coalition senators should read some of the case law in this area to realise that. Hate speech behaviour which the Labor Party believes has no place in a civilised society. And I will refresh those coalition senators' memories on some of that case law. The case of Jones and Tobin. The case of Jones and Tobin,
Order.
Which had Section 18C was used to combat infamous Holocaust denier Frederick Tobin, who sickeningly claimed that there is serious doubt that the Holocaust actually occurred. Shame! It was that case law that used Section 18C of the Racial Discrimination Act. So before coalition senators want to come in this place with a bill that removes that provision, they need to read back through that case law and think seriously about what you are trying to do, to this country that would remove those protections as they currently stand. Well, the Labor Party does not believe this sickening attack has any place in Australian society. If coalition senators want to vote to support Frederick Tobin and his ilk, then the Australian people will judge them accordingly, Mr Acting Deputy President.
Order. Order.
The Labor Party opposes this type of behaviour.
Order on my
and
right.
Today, coalition senators in this place must decide how they see this provision in that light. They must reflect on that case law when they are reflecting on their position and their beliefs and their principled so-called position on racial discrimination law. Also, perhaps they could talk to the attorney and perhaps they could also talk to the Prime Minister, because the last thing that the Australian community heard from them was that Section 18C was off the table. So where is the coalition on this position? Well, it is in a completely different space to the Labor Party, which stands for inclusion and stands for Section 18C to remain in our Racial Discrimination Act.